Welcome to the PALLATT, the podcast about language learning and teacher training by International House London. My name's Ted, and in today's episode, I'll be speaking with the Director of Sales and Marketing, Lawrence, about his experiences of London, including what he likes to do, eat and see around the city, as well as any useful tips for any students visiting London. Hi Lawrence, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, yeah, no worries.
Excellent stuff. So in today's episodes, we're going to be talking a little bit about London, why it's such a special city, what you enjoy about it, just for our listeners. So to kick it off, can you tell us 3 words to describe London?
There's a lot of words to describe London. They're not always nice words, but for me, my experience has always been positive. I find London to be inspirational. I find it to be a really exciting place to live, and I'd also call it a challenging place. It's it can be a bit of an unknown entity. It's a very big place. It's daunting at times, but it keeps you alive. So that challenge is what makes it quite exciting.
Yeah, I think when I certainly found that as well when first coming to the city, it is very very overwhelming, but yeah, as you say, it's part of the excitement, isn't it?
Absolutely, especially when you're from the countryside like myself. So a bit of excitement doesn't hurt.
Nice one. And what is your favourite time of year in London?
Look, I'm from the northwest where it's cold and it rains, so I love the summer, but actually I'm an autumn kind of guy. I love the different, the colours. There's an awful lot of greenery in London and a lot of parks. So when you see the summer transitioning into autumn, I think it's a really beautiful time. And also, I prefer to wear winter jackets and such. So autumn is my favourite time.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. The summer heat has been a little too hot for us this year. So yeah.
Especially when you don't have a swimming pool.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately not. So yeah, looking forward to autumn. And do you have any events that you particularly look forward to during the year in autumn or other seasons?
There's I think I'm quite keen on architecture and the way that the city looks. I love buildings and design of that nature. And at least once a year, there's I think they call it Open London, Open House. It's a festival where essentially you can get access to buildings that ordinarily are closed to the general public, and often a lot of those buildings have really ornate. They're quite. I guess the interiors are really quite opulent, so it's something that you would not ordinarily see or experience. Certainly wouldn't have it in your own home. So getting access to places like City Hall, for instance, is quite exciting. So that I'm not entirely certain when it is this year, but I think it's pretty much during the back end of the summer, the autumn. Open House London is my favourite time of year. I think a couple of years ago they combined it with the Luminaire Festival as well. So a lot of interesting lighting installations that are kind of presented onto the exterior of buildings, which also nice little touch. So yeah, anything that kind of celebrates the architecture and the design elements of London, I find quite exciting.
That's really cool. I've never heard of it, and funny you say that. Jamie said the exact same thing.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it is. So you've got a fellow enthusiast there.
We haven't compared notes.
Yeah,
this is done in isolation.
But no, sounds really cool. I'm keen to go sometime. And talking about things that you like visiting, is there a favourite museum of yours in London?
I got to be honest with you, I'm not a big museum fan. I typically am the guy that looks for the gift shop or the cafe as soon as he's in the museum. There was an interesting place that I had visited a little while ago, and I think it's the Cartoon Museum. It's just called the Cartoon Museum. They showcase a lot of different cartoons and comics and such. I'm not a geek per se, but did find it quite interesting, and something quite niche is, always worth celebrating. We've got the British Museum just up the road from the school, so if there's time on a lunch or an afternoon, of course, it's dead easy to visit. But I haven't been for some time, so we've got a cafe in the school. I don't need to search for the museum cafe. So there we go. I'll be honest.
So moving on, what type of foods do you enjoy eating most in London? Do you have like a favourite restaurant, area to eat, a market?
Well, I think it would be hard to find a destination on this earth where there is such a degree of variety in terms of what you want to eat. Um, I'm definitely a bit of a foodie. I love going out to eat, and I'm certain that a lot of our students or a lot of people watching this would also feel the same. It's a real attraction. Um, my preference in terms of cuisine, I love eating Asian food. Um, but actually, my favorite restaurant in the UK, or at least in London, is in it's in Farringdon. It's not too far away. Oh, it's called Saint. Sorry, it's not called Saint John's. Um, it's in Farringdon. It's called the Quality Chop House, and a lot of restaurants would claim the same kind of thing. They say, "Oh, well, we're the oldest restaurant in London, etc." But it's a really old establishment. I think it was founded sometime in the 1800s. Um, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, it's not best suited to you. But they just focus on specialty meats, and it's amazing. It's a great experience. The restaurant itself is kind of quite small and quite boutique, and you can tell the interior is from like centuries ago. So food is great, quite close to here. A little bit expensive, but it's definitely worth a visit. I think it's one of those kind of unknown, uncovered gems, and they've also got a kind of shop, a store that backs onto it where they sell different produce and lots of wines and cheeses and cured pickled goods and such. So definitely worth a visit.
Oh, nice one. Yeah, proper hidden gem. Never heard of it. So yeah, definitely need to try that out. Um, and kind of yeah, bringing it back actually to you said you were very interested in architecture and stuff. Is there a favourite building or landmark of yours in the city?
Um, Look, Central London's got so much to offer, and it's it's got that incredible juxtaposition of old and new. You could be stood at St Paul's and looking at the walkie-talkie, right? So there's such a range of stuff to see. But if you venture a little bit further out of the city, or at least the city centre, then there's some brutalist architecture which has kind of gained a bit of a cult following. There's actually a building in West London. It's very close to Notting Hill kind of area. It's called Trellick Tower. It's a horrible building, to be honest, but it's that brutalist style of architecture which is actually it's kind of one in a million. It you'd have to check it out. I really like that building. It's actually a block of flats, and in the kind of courtyard that occupies just outside of the flats, there's a playing field, and there's these four huge walls where people paint graffiti, which is quite interesting. But the building itself is quite iconic, and it's similar. It has a similar kind of state, a similar kind of era as the Centre Point building, which is just up the road from the school, and that's being in some way redeveloped or regenerated. If you look at ground level, what occupies the Centrepoint building now is ultra modern. It's like food courts and bars and restaurants, but the actual exterior of the building is still that old 1960s, really kind of unpleasant, but for some reason quite iconic architecture. So there's some interesting stuff about. But yeah, Trellick Tower for me in West London.
Sounds very kind of like authentic London. Not everywhere in London is like South Kensington. So
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be polished and perfect, and some, they say that the beauty is in the imperfections, right? So it's a nod to that.
summed it up perfectly. And your favourite park in the city?
An East London kind of guy. I live in and around East London. I'll say London Fields. Always always great for people watching, and tons of young people around. Lots of good places to drink. Close to Hackney Central, Hackney Downs. Exciting place to be. Yeah, check it out.
Cool, nice one. And what do you like doing in your free time in the city?
Aside from eating, um, I'm well. I wouldn't describe myself as a keen cyclist, but what is super convenient in this city is being able to get places on a bike, and it's quick. We've got a ton of cycle lanes that have been built, so you've got to have your wits about you, and it takes a little bit of time to learn your way around the city. It's so easy to navigate underground on the tube, but getting above ground, getting on a bike, and just experiencing what the city has to offer on two wheels, I think is something that I like to do. Just make sure you don't combine that with too many beers. Would be my advice.
Yeah, cycle and be sensible. But yeah, no, London's a great city to cycle around, and probably as you said, one of the better ways to explore for sure.
And cheap and free and good exercise. So there you go.
Particularly in summer, actually, you don't want to be crammed on a hot tube like a sardine. You want to be out and about. So great shout. And yeah, do you have any other tips for people visiting the city? Anything you'd suggest doing?
Guess it guess it really depends on what you're looking for. I honestly, Ted, I'm not entirely certain. There's the obvious stuff like we've got thousands of museums and galleries, of which many of them are free. But actually, my my assessment would be: look, London is a super multicultural city, and there's so much to see and do here. There are Londoners here, and there are native English speakers here too, and a lot of the culture that can be experienced in the city, or at least that is indicative of what British people do and like, can be found in a pub. I know that sounds a bit lame, but if you want a genuine snapshot of what life is like and how society behaves, and how that compares and contrasts with where you're from, then I think getting into a nice old London pub um, is a really great way to experience culture and meet people, because whilst British people are not the most open and friendly, after they've had a beer or a glass of wine, they probably become a little bit more open to conversation. So of course it doesn't mean that you need to have a drink, but being in those kind of places and enjoying the interiors and the architecture and the
Mm,
atmosphere is quite a nice way to experience what's going on in London. So bit of a cop out, but maybe maybe a nice way to experience what London has to offer.
No, I think that is just British people and their element, and they're at ease, and you find a lot of friendly people in pubs. So yeah, definitely make sure to go to one of those ones around the corner from the school.
Yeah, 100%. Go to the Cross Keys. It's just by the school. It's a beautiful exterior. It's got hanging plants and vines, and inside it you've got copper pots, and it looks like it hasn't changed for 150 years. So check it out.
Probably hasn't. No, that is a favourite for staff and students.
The the bar staff probably the same as well.
Cool, cool. And do you have a most memorable London moment?
I think actually, Mum, and it harks back to before I lived in London. So I've lived in London for now 13 or 14 years. But my most memorable experience of London was when I was a young boy and I was visiting here with my mom and dad, and I got lost in Harrods, which is a department store, and I lost my parents, and I spent a good part of that day trying to find them. I was wandering around Regent Street and Knightsbridge on my own until I finally found my parents. But actually, it wasn't. I mean, I'm sure my parents were quite worried at the time, but for me, it was a amazing experience. I was 6 or 7 years of age, and I just couldn't believe the amount of activity around me. It was awe inspiring. I think it probably had played a part in some way for me to eventually move to London. So I guess I like that hustle and bustle, and that's my earliest recollection of London. I think it kind of stuck with me. So um, bad situation perhaps, but actually take it as a positive. It's actually quite a nice memory.
Yeah, it sounded like you got lost on purpose, to be honest. But yeah, at least it wasn't too traumatizing. Quite sounds quite exciting. And yeah, just to wrap it up, kind of running out of time here. Yeah, to wrap it up, why should students choose to study in London?
Well, I think it's obviously it depends on what you're looking for as a person, but London has everything a student needs. Um, you have a lot of choice in terms of where it is that you can study, and you'll find that the quality institutions are centered in and around London. So if you're looking for quality, then London's a great place for you to start. Um, as a student, you want to have, or you want to be surrounded by people that have similar, you know, objectives or desires to you, interests and such, and you want to find some common ground. And there's no there's no better city in the world to find that. We've got countless universities here, language schools, colleges. So you're you're in a destination which is being globally voted as being one of the best, student cities in the world. And there's a reason for that. And it's not just the student population; it's also the other aspects of the city which allow you to access different culture, see museums, galleries, libraries, all of that kind of thing. So the city's geared up to accommodate students better than most. You've got a fantastic transport network, which actually is not too expensive. You've got fantastic food from all over the world. You're never going to feel homesick here. You're always going to find something which will remind you of where you're from. Those creature comforts that you like from home, you'll be able to find those as well. So I couldn't think of somewhere else better for an international student who wants to study English or prepare for a future degree program where English is a feature of that than London. I think it's without question the best place to be in the UK. So, of course, I'm biased. I live here, but when you break it down to its constituent parts, there's not much competition.
I think you've done my job for me, Lawrence, and perfectly sums it up. But yeah, that is absolutely bang on the money. Thank you so much for your time, Lawrence. Really appreciate it, and for sharing your experiences and thoughts on the city. I'm sure the listeners will really appreciate that. So thank you very much.